Hello guys and welcome back to a new video. If you will enjoy it, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments to help me boost this video. Thanks. Story 1. TIFU by accidentally revealing a deep, dark secret during a job interview. So, I had been job searching for months and finally landed an interview for a really great position at a top company. I was feeling pretty confident and well prepared, dressed in my best business attire and ready to nail it. The interview was going smoothly, with the interviewer asking me all the typical questions about my experience and skills. I was answering each one thoughtfully, trying to make the best impression possible. Then the interviewer asked me a question that I wasn't prepared for. What's something about yourself that most people wouldn't know? I froze for a moment, racking my brain for a good answer. I didn't want to say something boring or cliche, but I also didn't want to reveal anything too personal or weird. And that's when I made a huge mistake. In a moment of panic, I blurted out, "Well, I like to collect dead animal parts and rearrange them to create hybrid beasts." As soon as the words left my mouth, I knew I had screwed up. The interviewer's face went from polite interest to utter confusion and disgust. I could tell she was trying to keep a professional demeanor, but I could see the horror in her eyes. I quickly tried to backpedal, explaining that it was just a silly hobby, and all the animals I found were already dead. But it was too late. The damage was done. I could tell the interviewer had already mentally checked me off the list of potential hires. I left the interview feeling like a complete idiot. How could I have revealed such a weird and embarrassing secret? I immediately called my best friend to vent, and she burst out laughing. At first, I was mortified, but then I started to see the humor in the situation. I mean, who wouldn't want to see a cat with geese wings and a beaver tail? I decided to embrace my weirdness and post about it on Reddit, hoping to get some laughs and maybe some job search advice. And, well, that's how I ended up here, writing this post. So, if anyone has any tips on how to recover from a terrible job interview, or if you want to see pictures of Fluffy, let me know. Story 2. TIFU by booking my flight and having an adventure. This happened last month. I am 20 of a music composer, and I am working on the soundtrack of a movie. I live in Spain, but because of the movie's production stuff, I had to go to the UK to solve some things. That's fine, so I prepare for the trip and buy my tickets. The website I was using displays the date of your departure on the top with arrows that you can click to go forwards or backwards one day. So I select 17th of February as my departure, select the flight and everything. And I click next to do the same for my return. The website goes to the 18th. I click the arrows until the 27th. And buy my ticket back. So far so good. The trip continues. I go to the UK and everything goes well. I solved the legal stuff, checked some musicians, visit some studios. A really nice trip. Only downside was that I wasn't able to sleep on the bus on my way back until I am at the airport going back home. I arrive with my self-check-in paper and walk until the scanner. But when I put in the scanner, it says that there are no flights with that information. I get confused. I try a few times and always the same result. I ask the staff for help, and they try their best until we all noticed. And that's when the adventure starts. When I clicked to check the return flights, it didn't took me to the 18th of February because it was the next day of my departure. It took me to the next date with an available flight, the 18th of March, 1 month ahead, and I ended up buying my flight for the 27th of March. So now I was stranded in London. The staff couldn't do anything because I bought it normally. It wasn't a mistake they made, just my ADHD and poor user interface. After some time of despair and anxiety, I had two options. Option 1 was to take the next flight available, 5 days ahead, which was not on my budget to do so. Or option 2, hit a flight next day to another city that is 2 hours away from where I live, and get a train there. However, the flight would arrive 1 hour before the last train, and the airport was far away from the station. I got option 2. I waited 26 hours in Gatwick Airport. My anxiety was through the roof, and I couldn't sleep at all. I think I never felt so much boredom in my life. Watched a few movies, walked around, ate just a simple sausage sandwich. Eventually the time comes. I board the flight, and for my despair, It gets delayed like 15 minutes, which is not much, but I had a train to catch. We arrive and I immediately start running, get yelled by security to stop running, and start to walk as fast as I could. They check my passport, and I go get a taxi. I explained the situation, and the taxi driver was awesome. I'm pretty sure he broke the speed limit a few times. I pay him with a tip, leave the taxi, and go running to the station. In the way there it started to rain a lot, so I left the taxi, ran through the rain, slipped and fell in a puddle of street water, and got in the station. I was the last person to board that train. But I got it. 26 hours in an airport, 34 hours, without sleep, one sausage sandwich, a mildly sprained ankle, and a lot less money in my bank account, but I got there. When I arrived home, I took a shower and slept for like 16 hours. Story 3. TIFU by telling my English teacher I would whip her. This happened a long time ago, when I was about 12 years old. I'm from Slovakia, where we have this really weird tradition during Easter. It's right around the corner. It involves pouring buckets of water on women and spanking them with whips made out of willow branches, decorated with colorful ribbons that each girl you visit attaches to the rest. There are literally groups of guys walking down the street looking like the peaky fucking blinders collecting debts during that day lol. Understandably, this may appear very bizarre or even barbaric to a foreigner at first glance, as it simply sounds like we go door to door chasing, waterboarding, and beating women. While partially true, there is some symbolism behind it. And these customs go way back to ancient spring festivals. We pour buckets of water on our women to make sure that they stay as beautiful as they are for the entire year. The same goes for the spanking custom, where we additionally ward off evil spirits. Sounds much better now, doesn't it? Now, with this cultural background info in mind, back to my story. I always enjoyed English lessons when I was a kid. However, my grammar and vocabulary were very limited at that time since I was a beginner. One day, a new teacher arrived in our school. She was young, came from Oregon, and was really nice and friendly. I may have had a little crush on her. The fact that she was a native English speaker was very exciting to everyone, and it was the first time I've interacted with a foreigner in a second language. She often talked about her life in America, her own customs and traditions such as Thanksgiving or Halloween that we don't really celebrate here. A couple of months after her arrival, during the Easter holidays, I wanted to demonstrate our customs to her for a change, and thought I'd pay her a visit. Naturally, I equipped myself with a small bucket of water, a nice perfume that you add after the whole ordeal is over, and besides granting them infinite beauty, they also smell nice afterwards. Then, of course, my primary weapon, a traditional willow whip. After getting ready, I made my way to her apartment building, unannounced. Once I reached the door, found her name, got my broken English ready, and confidently buzzed her apartment. She clearly wasn't expecting any visitors, and sounded genuinely confused. The dialogue went something like this. Buzz. Yes. Hello. I am. Who is it? It is I. Name. What are you doing here? I come to whip you. I'm sorry. Oh, it's okay. I come for the traditional whipping. This was followed by dead silence, after which she buzzed me in without saying anything. I went inside thinking this was an absolutely smooth conversation, and felt quite proud of myself for my impressive English skills. I took the elevator to her floor and knocked on the door. I imagine she must have been quite terrified at that point. She slowly and carefully opened the door just enough to take a peek at this goofy idiot kid standing there with a smile on his face, holding a whip in his hand and a bucket of water in the other. The ridiculous exchange continued something among these lines. Happy Easter. Are you okay? What's going on? You need to be pretty, so I put water on you now, okay. What? No, why? Is this a prank? Where are your parents? Oh, no, Dad, and I go whip my mom. And Aunt soon. You first. Ugh, a tradition. Okay. How does it work, though? Do I wash my hands and face in the bucket or something? I know. I need to put this water on you and whip you with this. Then you're pretty. Then I'm pretty. Okay. Well, I don't know what's happening, and I'm a little scared, but go ahead, I guess. Please be careful, though. Can you be careful? Thank God I could at least tell that she was in a bit of a shock, so luckily I didn't empty the bucket in her face point blank like I would usually do to my female relatives. Instead, I just put my hands in the bucket and gently splashed some water on her with my fingers. She was laughing at this point, but was still visibly confused, saying, "What is going on?" repeatedly. Then I said, "Now I spray this on you so you smell nice, okay?" Took out the perfume from my pocket. Aha, I get it, so I'm not pretty, and I stink too, great. Okay, and now I whip you with this, and say a poem. Yeah, there's also this ridiculous chant I forgot to mention that men say while putting girls through all of this. I found a spot-on explanation of it when I was looking for a rough translation. And then there are the absurd chants, which more than folklore resemble lines out of a Monty Python movie. Wacky wimpy, give no fishy. There's just one thing that I beg, a wonderful Easter egg. She was laughing and hollering the entire time. And once I was done, I immediately followed that with, "Okay, haha, now I want candy." It's also customary for the girls to give kids chocolate eggs, sweets, or even pocket money. Adults get booze. Oh, but I don't have any at home. I'm so sorry. She went inside to look for something, and came back with a Tic Tac or a gum, I think, and apologized again for not having anything better at home. I tried explaining that it's all right, and all I wanted to do was show her the tradition, and left, completely happy with how that all went down. She talked to my former English teacher in school, who then called me to join them and help translate things so everything was explained, and they had a nice laugh about it. However, I'm absolutely mortified thinking back at how clueless I was that day, and what an embarrassment that was. Story 4. TIFU by being too friendly. I'd been a frequent customer at a 7-Eleven near my job, and I've gotten pretty cool with the staff. 3 employees in particular, because they are usually the ones on shift during the times I visit. Let's call the 2 employees in this story Ashley and Brittany for name's sake. I went in the store and Ashley was working that day. Ashley, another customer, and we got into a conversation about kids and marriage. The other customer was in front of me, and she leaves after she pays for her items. So it's just me and Ashley now. And I continue with the conversation by asking Ashley a few questions. I asked her did she want kids, and she replies one day her and her wife want kids. I then ask her how long she's been married, and did they have a nice honeymoon since her marriage was recent. She answered those 2 questions, and then asked me why am I being so personal very aggressively. She was visibly upset, so I apologized, and attempted to explain I didn't meant anything by it, and thought it was regular conversation. I do want to put out there Ashley has asked me personal questions in previous visits, so I was confused as to why she took offense to me asking the questions I asked, especially since they were in context of the topic we were discussing when the other customer was present. Fast forward to yesterday, I visit the store, and Brittany is working that day. Brittany is a stud lesbian, and my apologies if my terms out offensive, but I'm not sure how else to describe her. Brittany greets me as usual, and when I went to check out, she says angrily, "Are you the one who asking my wife all those personal questions about how long we've been married?" I responded yes, it was me, and I didn't mean anything by it. I said I thought I was just making conversation. She then proceeds to tell me that that's her wife, and she figured it was me asking awkwardly. I reiterated that in my mind I was just being friendly since I had gotten familiar with them over the last few months, and had no idea they were married. I awkwardly waited to pay for my stuff and proceeded to leave. I was also on the phone with my fiancé during this whole ordeal. We both agreed my friendliness was mistakenly taken as flirty. Needless to say, I want being going back after that awkward encounter. Story 5. TIFU by picking a bucket rat to dissect in biology class. I'm a non-traditional student going back to school to finish my degree. In my Bio 122 lab class, we dissected rats. There were 2 types of rats, bucket rats, which were pretty large, and bag rats, which were smaller. We were supposed to alternate with our other table mates so we could see both. The other group at my table didn't want to do the big rat, so I agreed to swap with them and do the bucket rat. Our rat was absolutely massive. Not including his tail, his body was nearly as long as my forearm, and his middle was so big I could barely put my hands around him. My teacher comments on how he was a big boy. When it was time to cut him open, I soon realized that the reason he was so big was because he had 2 golf ball-sized tumors in his lower abdomen. My teacher was ecstatic. She said she had never seen anything like that before. She told us to work around them, and we would look at them as a class at the end. It was a real pain working around the tumors, as I'm sure you can imagine they obstructed quite a bit since they were so large. Several organs were not where they should have been as well. I ended up having to remove the smaller tumor so that I could see the bladder. At the end of lab, when everyone else had cleaned up their stations, my teacher instructed me to take my rat to the middle of the room and cut open the tumors so that everyone else could watch. Now for the traumatic part. I quickly realized that the tumors weren't actually tumors, as I cut into the first one. They were giant pus-filled cysts. Creamy off-white liquid started squirting out. The stench was horrible. Several of my classmates jumped back in horror. My teacher found this development to be even more awesome. She made me squeeze out the contents while she recorded a video loudly proclaiming, "Yeah, just like Dr. Pimple Popper." I'm not sure how I made it out of that lab without losing my lunch. I shouldn't have agreed to switch rats. Story 6. TIFU by Misusing Electrical Socket. This is fairly light FUP, but I realized it could have ended much worse, so here it is for your enjoyment. Or as a cautionary tale. Doing my PhD on it at faculty, oftentimes it is necessary to set up some experimental on a fairly short notice. For most people it meant doing coding overnight. However, I came from a mechatronic faculty and was therefore usually tasked with anything hardware, electronic related. This time it was to prepare a way to quickly switch various light sources on, off, and between one of 2 positions to perform measurement of photometric, electric, and some other variables. Having quickly prepared and 3D printed a stand that allowed the 2 positions, I needed to make sure the stand was powered and allowed measuring of voltage and current. Now the actual site where people were expected, I secured all, making sure no live wires were exposed. On my desk while preparing it, however. Anyway, I basically stuck one end of ampere meter to the power socket extension on my desk, other into the stand. Voltmeter 2 I stuck in the power socket extension, in case there was some variation to 230V at the moment of measurement. And finally, to close the circuit, I extended one loose wire from the socket to the other end of the stand. So a fairly messy build. It all measured well. Stand seemed to be working. I turned off the socket extension and took the stand to the experiment room to set it up. It took past midnight, so I went home straight after. Next day I am invited to the property manager's office, where it is explained to me that sticking wires into the socket is both a fire and a health hazard, and that by leaving it on my desk I have endangered a member of the custodial staff, who while cleaning my desk was surprised and distressed when they touched a wire, which they later noticed leads to a power socket extension. I note that I turned the socket off before I left, and that I am certified to play with live electricity basically resolved the whole issue. The cleaning lady did not communicate that it was an extension that could be and was turned off. So essentially the only real consequence was that work area has been removed from cleaning rotation and has not been cleaned for the rest of my time there. On retrospect, I realized that if they wanted to pursue this further, they could, on account of me failing to place a live electricity sign on my work area. Story 7. TIFU by teaching my then 8-year-old brother an Among Us phrase. This happened about 2 years ago, but it's still one of my most embarrassing moments. At the time, I was really into the game Among Us, and was constantly using the phrase "sussy baka" to describe players who were acting suspicious. I thought it was hilarious, and my little brother thought so too. One day, I was babysitting him while my parents were out, and we were playing Among Us. He made a move that I thought was sneaky, and I jokingly called him a sussy baka. He thought it was funny, and started saying it all the time. I didn't think much of it and didn't realize how much trouble it would cause. The next day, my little brother went to school and started saying sussy baka to his classmates. Apparently, they had no idea what it meant but thought it sounded like a bad word. One of the other kids told the teacher, who immediately called my parents and told them that their child was using inappropriate language at school. My parents were livid when they found out what happened and demanded to know where my brother had learned such a thing. When they asked him, he innocently replied, "My big brother taught me." My parents then turned their anger towards me, and I had to explain that it was just a silly phrase from a video game. To make matters worse, my little brother ended up getting disciplined at school, and my parents grounded me for a week for my bad influence. It was definitely not my proudest moment, and I learned a valuable lesson about being mindful of what I say around kids.